It's not just about kind of creating a meal and managing the restaurant. It's about how do you also kind of help these distributors who are critical to the supply chain, and helping them kind of manage their businesses more efficiently as well. So that's kind of the other side of the equation for me, and then looking at kind of the suppliers and how do we work with them as well in terms of giving them the data that makes them more efficient and more knowledgeable in terms of where they spend their promotional dollars.
Welcome to Whisking It All with your host, Angelo Esposito, co-founder of Whisk.ai, a food and beverage intelligence platform. We're going to be interviewing hospitality professionals around the world to really understand how they do what they do.
Welcome to another episode of Whisking It All. We're here today with John Florinis, EVP Product at Meal Ticket. John, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Angelo. Great to be here.
Excited to have you here. So we go way back in the restaurant space, but we'll get into that. But I was excited to have you on. I know now, or it's been a little bit now that you're at Meal Ticket, but I'm sure a lot of people in the restaurant space know about Meal Ticket. But for those who don't, can you briefly tell people what is Meal Ticket?
Yeah, Meal Ticket is obviously a technology company that kind of helps stakeholders across the food service value chain. So everyone from a supplier to a distributor to an operator or a restaurant. We have kind of solutions that allow each of those stakeholders to kind of operate their businesses a little bit more effectively.
Got it. Amazing. And I know I always like to understand people's backstory. I find hospitality obviously very interesting space because that's where we play, but that crossover between hospitality and technology. And so I know your journey kind of goes from fintech and payments industry to kind of today Meal Ticket. Can you maybe just walk us through that journey of how you got into the fintech payment side and like what led up to Meal Ticket?
My story actually starts in the restaurant world. Right. So I grew up in restaurants. My family, my parents owned a restaurant. Being in Canada, when most kids are getting up at 4 or 5 in the morning to drive to the hockey rink, I was getting up at 4 or 5 in the morning to make French fries. That's kind of been, the in and out of growing up and working in a restaurant, is very, kind of, you don't lose that perspective. But, as kind of time went on and you kind of go through school and just being faced with the, as society evolved, the internet became more prevalent, and kind of growing up during that era. Growing up in a restaurant and then kind of working, in school, I landed in payments, right? And that was something that kind of, right out of university, I kind of jumped into the payment space and never, kind of grew up in the evolution of e-commerce, and grew up during the stages of kind of integrated payments. So taking like POS and software and then kind of driving integration. I've been very fortunate in my career to work on initiatives that, have kind of been, more on the leading edge of innovation. So that, so kind of driving new use cases, new products. And so I've been very fortunate throughout my career to kind of be working on special projects and being afforded opportunities to lead teams and lead, new products. And then, kind of, growing up in a restaurant, jumping into the kind of, banking systems and payments, and then coming full circle, kind of combining both, right? So getting into the restaurant tech space, with the heavy focus on payments, but also on SaaS as well, has been kind of a great kind of combination of everything I've worked on over the last few years.
I love that. And so then from the payment side, obviously, where I think I officially met you was when you were in the POS space. I think at the time I know at the time it was Touch Bistro. But tell me a bit about that. How did you go from the payment side to then jumping into the world of, POS?
Yeah, I mean, POS has always been kind of near and dear, right? And I think the notion of payments and POS are kind of intertwined.
Yep.
I can think back into early 2000s, to 2010, 2012 range, where a lot of businesses were running inefficiently, right? They had their payment processor and then they had their software, right? And there's a lot of inefficiencies in that, and I think through the proliferation and growth of SaaS solutions, the ability to kind of combine payments with software became easier, right? You were able to integrate pin pads and all that stuff that's kind of old school legacy
Right.
became far more adaptable and easier to integrate. And that's so I mean, I've always kind of worked on those kind of initiatives. So kind of the transition from payments to software, wasn't that difficult. The notion of product management between traditional kind of acquirer or even MasterCard type of approach is a little bit more. You have to really focus on security and stability and make sure that you have no. You really don't want to you don't want to have any potential gaps in what you're delivering.
Right.
There's security, there's people's money on the line.
Right.
And software moves fast, right? There's a lot of iteration. You go, you speak to customers, you iterate. So combining those two worlds has been really, really exciting.
That's awesome. And I'd love to understand, like, how have you seen maybe a bit of that evolution of the restaurant space, right? From early days working in it, but I think you kind of touched on it, but the idea of the 2010 world and payment processing to the POS, like, how have you seen that evolution to today? Like, what does 2020 onward, I mean, 2020 was COVID, but onward restaurant tech look like? And what are some things in the restaurant tech world that's kind of been, piquing your curiosity?
Just like with the introduction of any kind of new technology or, it kind of comes in phases and stages, right? If you kind of start at the 2000 mark, I kind of mentioned you had like these on-prem systems, very, very antiquated in terms of capabilities that, the web wasn't really, it was there, but it wasn't there. And then you kind of move into the next phase, which was like integrating payments. And then that was kind of the next phase of evolution that kind of accelerated. And then you moved from traditional, client server type implementations to tablet, right? Tablet was driven by SaaS, right? So you kind of look at the evolution of that space and how a lot of customers have migrated towards, SaaS POS versus kind of the client server market.
Right.
And you see how different companies have adopted. I think payments was a big catalyst to help drive that. And now, as I look forward, there's a lot of other opportunities around, integrating not just kind of the front of house functionality, but also some of the back of house capabilities as well, and having a unified experience. I do think operators are evolving. I think, given the tools provided and presented to them, allow them to be a lot more efficient. Yeah. But it's the underlying tech stack that they invest in that affords them that opportunity.
That makes sense. Like it's something we see at Whisk too, right? It's like back house is becoming more important. We've seen it over the years. Like it's always important. I shouldn't say becoming more important. Sorry, but becoming easier to sell in the sense that I think like. If I think about like cash days and just the fact that I'm saying that, but like, before in Quebec, you got the black box and you got a lot more control and you got reporting purposes and whatnot with taxes. But I think about cash days, people were more like, I'm not worried about inventory. I'm not worried about this. And as the world's evolved and got more strict and everything is, kind of logged, people have been kind of change the perception on that because now they know they got to track everything. And then I think for another interesting catalyst was, even though it was horrible for the industry, but like COVID, obviously because so many restaurants were closed and a lot, suffered during that time. But one interesting thing is I think a lot of them became more cost conscious because it was like they had to survive. So it's like they really scrutinized their typical, monthly expenses. What are we paying for? Looking at their food costs, their beverage costs, their labor costs. And it's like good operators always did that, but I think it kind of made it so a larger percentage of operators are now like a bit more intertwined and understanding like, oh shit, okay, like there is a big difference if my food cost is 50% or 30%. It's not just this buzzword of food cost. It's like this actually affects my bottom line, my profitability. So I think it bridged that gap because a lot of people were like, yeah, like the way I would almost summarize it, I think, generalizing here, but a lot of restaurants were more like, sales oriented, like if you think of how can I get more people in the door? How can I do more marketing? How can I do a promote? It's like more just how can I get revenue and less kind of looking at expenses and cutting costs. It's always easier to sell more revenue than let me help you cut costs. But I think that the one caveat is I think post-COVID, a lot more people are open to the show me how to cut costs.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I mean, kind of living the restaurant life. I mean, these are real people, right? These are people with families, with obligations. And when COVID came about, like you really look at personally and philosophically, like, I mean, you want to see people thrive and want to see them, succeed, especially in this space, right? So it's and you know, the one thing that kind of COVID or the pandemic observationally taught me was there's so much resilience, right? Just the ability to navigate, you know, changing bylaws, you know, changing customer, you know, attitudes and prevent, you know, like the way people kind of dined, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of see the flexibility and the resiliency of the restaurant community. Again, thinking through, you know, my upbringing in that environment, like, you know, there's someone at the end of the day that has to put food on their family's table, right?
Yeah.
And being able to kind of provide them with the tools and capabilities that allow them to make those informed decisions. I mean, we have, you know, we have products that you know, in our Market suite that kind of speak to, you know, to how operators can you know, manage the costs and all that.
Yeah.
But if you think through kind of, you know, the day-to-day action, like they're showing up to work, they're, you know, if you can shave off an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours a week, you know, that's time that you're giving back. You know, you may not, you know, in their minds, they may not be calculating that, okay, this is, you know, $20 an hour, or whatever the case may be. But the fact that you've given that time back that allow them to get, you know, improve that quality of life, you know, there's value in that. And I think we kind of both, you know, we both value that side of the business as well.
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting. I'd love to know, like, you're, you know, one thing I always find is like restaurants today are they are bombarded with technology. And some of it's great. Some of it maybe is a lot of noise, but like, obviously there's real technology that'll help. I'm curious, how do you think about the typical, you know, tech stack when it comes to a restaurant? Like, what are the you know, top 3 or top 5 things you would say are like super important? Because, you know, there's a million and one apps and you can have an app for this, that. But like, when you think about a restaurant tech stack, what are maybe the 3 to 5 things they should definitely look for?
You know, I would say there's probably 3 things, right? So I think, you know, you would need really solid POS that kind of supports your operational workflow, right? And then that needs to dovetail into kind of back of house, so like, you know, inventory management and costs like that. Because I think, you know, we kind of circled around it, is like, you really need to have the ability to understand your business, right? And you can do it with a pen and paper, but again, going back to that quality of life, like, no, it's not really something, you know, I think anyone in today's world would really want. Yeah. And then I think the last thing, again, depending on the size of the business, is proper labor management and controls.
Makes sense.
Right? Those are kind of the 1, 2, 3. You can augment your business with loyalty programs. You can augment it with you know, like you know, like fridge monitoring tools and stuff like that. Like, all that stuff is great. You know, but I think ultimately, you know, those are kind of the 1, 2, 3 that I think are critical to a successful operation. If you kind of look around and you kind of look at the, you know, successful operators, they've kind of, you know, mastered a blend of those 3, right? And I think that's kind of my observation.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I was literally just earlier this morning, I had a coffee with someone and we're talking about the restaurant space, and I had the exact same analysis. I was kind of like, look, if I think about it logically, you need the POS. Like, it's a very competitive industry and there's a lot, and people are fighting for their market share, but ultimately, like, can't run it if you can't sell anything. So it makes sense. And then the way I saw it, and I think you nailed it, is like, if you really think about a restaurant, there's a reason it's called the prime cost, right? It's like the main cost. And the prime cost is made up of labor and cost of goods sold. And so it's like, yeah, you should probably have something to help with your labor, which could be a mix of scheduling and maybe payments or whatever. And then your cost of goods sold, you might have a market man, you might have a whisk, you might have whatever, but definitely use something. Like, even if you don't use whisk, like, use something because, like, it's your prime cost. And so I totally agree. And then after that, there's obviously super valuable tools, loyalty being one of them, which was actually the one I thought of too. I was like, probably number 4 on the list would be loyalty. It's funny to see the way you thought, because I had this same thought process. And then obviously there's just apps that can help, but I see them as secondary, whether it might be like online ordering stuff or like integrations with that type of thing, or chargebacks. Like, there's, you know, managing chargebacks when you have, you know, multiple stores and you do third-party delivery. Like, there's a million and one other ways to optimize, but yeah, I definitely like the way you're thinking, because at a high level, I think those are the basis points. You think of, how can I sell? How can I know what I'm selling if I'm actually making money, right? Which might sound obvious, but like, I find a lot of people make that mistake. You talk to someone, they're like, yeah, I made $12,000 on Friday. And you're like, you made $12,000 in revenue, but how much did you actually make? You know, like, they get used to that POS report where it tells you your sales. nothing wrong with that, but that's sales data. Like, you now need to understand, like, cool, you sold 227 hamburgers. Great. How much money did you make off those hamburgers? Like, very important question. And then labor, obviously, in today's world is just with rising costs, and then inflation is just insane. So managing that to a certain extent is super important. So super neat. And so I'm curious to talk about you guys, right, at Meal Ticket, at MarketMan, obviously being EVP of product. How are you thinking about like the best way to kind of, support these restaurants? Because one of the challenges that I sometimes find is there's kind of this, I guess, balance between like, okay, here's all this tech to help you. If you want to go all the way, you can. But like going all the way requires a lot of work, because now you're managing inventory, obviously your invoices, your recipes, your this. And yes, all that is needed, but it's also that fine line of, how far can you get, but without also maybe crossing that line of like, now this is taking so much time because I'm, tracking every little thing. So I find there's like this weird balance in this inventory / back house space. I'd love to get your take on it and how you guys think about managing that.
Yeah, so great question, very timely actually. So what we so obviously there's a step that an operator, a restaurant takes in their journey, says like, I need to get better at this, and I think that's the step where they start evaluating solutions, right? Then there's the step of like, I'm going to choose a solution and I'm going to invest the time and energy to make it work, and they build that. Just like with any corporation, you have systems and processes.
Yeah.
And I think those systems and processes are kind of how an operator kind of evolves their business. So they're doing counts, they're doing these things that kind of allow them to maintain and understand these costs, and they're scanning invoices. They're doing all the things that need to be done. But then it's about how do they then propagate that through their staff and making sure that their staff are involved. So I think the evolution. So like you could do that if you're in HQ, you have the discipline and all that kind of stuff to kind of manage that. One of the things that we've done specifically is we recognize that some customers can get it, can start right out of the gate and get in and start using it. But we just recently acquired a firm that allows or helps our customers with professional services. So and what they essentially would do is they'll come in and consult and kind of build and integrate the MarketMan platform into your business, and kind of help build that workflow, right? And get you up and running and all that. And as part of that, you get trained and all that kind of great stuff. So you kind of build that workflow in business, and you create those manuals and processes. So depending on where you are in your journey as an operator, you can have that ability to kind of leverage, services, to kind of help, get some help. Yeah. Because you're busy, right? You're doing other things. You're running a kitchen. We know, like restaurateurs, like there is no punch clock, right? Yeah. It's you work until you have to kind of put the chairs up and mop the floors, right? Yeah. So like recognizing that there's different needs at different stages and different levels of assistance, we view that as an important component of our business and how we help our customers.
Love that. No, it's great to hear, because honestly, even here at Whisk, like one of our, and you probably know this, but one of our missions is literally our main mission statement is really to give restaurateurs their time back to focus on the things they love. It's like no one loves inventory, no one loves invoicing, no one loves recipe costing, let's be honest, but it's like such a crucial part to running your restaurant. It's like, and how do you help? And I love that you're doing that. Like, some people are like, oh man, this is having, competitors on the same call. But for me, it's like the industry is massive. At the end of the day, no matter what tool someone's using, if it's actually helping them run their restaurant, their back of house, become more profitable, et cetera, that's a win. And I love what you guys are doing, because one thing we found that was helpful, and it's similar, but it's services, but it's the recipes. So we were like, man, people hate inputting recipes. Let's just offer it as an add-on. If someone wants it, send us all your recipes and we'll enter for you, which, to be honest, is like a really good value prop, because even for us, to be fair, it's a pain in the ass, but entering recipes is always a pain in the ass. There's no way around it, but it's been nice to tell people, like, send us what you got. We'll get 80% of the way there, and then we'll come back with questions, because you know how chefs are. They'll say a bunch of this, a bit of that, and you got and in a tool, you need the specificity of like, what do you mean by a bunch, and what do you mean a bit of this and a bit of that? So it's cool to hear. I love to know kind of like what was when you think about like the restaurant industry as a whole. What do you think is like the next step, or I mean, maybe not next step, the evolution when it comes to, let's say, back of house? You know, so like you think of reservations, maybe, you know, back in the day from pen and paper to then the open tables of the world, and you know, it's now more advanced CRMs, whatever. You think about POS, and you kind of already went through it, but the idea of like the legacy on premise, client server side to tablet, et cetera, et cetera. So when you think of like our space, obviously it started off with pen and paper, and now it's like going digital. But what do you see as maybe the evolution? Like what's next?
It's like, you kind of have, the work that we do with like inventory and all that, and that kind of links to accounting systems. I could probably anticipate, some sort of, tighter integration there.
Yeah.
Right. Obviously, the role of AI, playing a big part in terms of how operators leverage AI. I think, we do a lot of work to kind of think about like, how do we introduce, AI, but really AI is just another way for us to, introduce features differently, right? Or faster, right? And kind of like, it's not like I'm going to go build AI. No, AI is part of the build now, right? I think that's kind of the thinking. I don't, I know some more advanced operators are kind of looking at tools to kind of, expedite data entry and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But like I haven't really seen anything kind of mind blowing at this point. But I mean, it's going to be efficiency gains, right?
Yeah.
Again, going back to that notion of how do I save more time, right?
Yeah.
How do I, rather than having someone scanning invoices all day, maybe I can have them, doing some prep, right? Like so I think that's kind of, what, just that continual tweaking and optimization for back of house.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of, a lot of opportunities to kind of clean that up a little bit more. And actually, like, you're aware, I'm aware, like there's a huge, pen and paper community still out there, right? Yeah. And there's a lot of opportunity to I think to convert those.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think people will be surprised of how many restaurants are still on pen and paper or maybe a basic Excel type sheet, which is nuts. I mean, look, if you're a really, really small business, maybe you can get away with it, right? You don't have a ton of SKUs and you're there every day as the owner operator. But there's a certain scale where it just doesn't make sense, and you're just leaving money on the table by doing it really inefficiently.
Well, and it cuts into your quality of life.
Yeah.
Right? I think right? I think that's the main thing.
That makes sense. That's cool. One interesting thing, I'm always trying to keep up with what's up there. One interesting thing I've seen on kind of the AI side, it's not there yet, but I've seen some demos of it, is kind of like the whole image recognition thing. So like taking a picture of like, I think it was like kind of a video of kind of a Subway style where it's like, you're in your back of house and you got your tomatoes in a container and this, and it's kind of like with the camera estimating how full those containers are, and it's recognizing the item. So, it's obviously not fully there and there's a bunch of holes, but I agree with you. I think for now, most of these things that are coming out are just improvements of existing processes. So like maybe you were entering invoices before, now you're scanning them and it's using OCR. And now maybe there's a step further where there's some, advanced learning models and this and that. But it's really neat to see this evolution. But I think going back to the main principle, it's like, how do you help restaurants become more profitable and really ultimately just save them time to focus on what they love to do? Yeah, I mean, shifting gears a little, maybe just going with, speaking of trends and whatnot, being, EVP of product at Meal Ticket, you obviously got to be on top of these latest trends and innovations. How do you stay on top of, these SaaS and fintech and restaurant tech?
A lot of it's just talking to customers, quite frankly. And I have the benefit of talking to customers across the value chain, right? So we spoke a lot about operators, but a lot of our business is actually food distributors, right? Where we're talking, a fantastic group of companies that essentially work with all the major manufacturers and suppliers, and on a regional basis across, the US and Canada, deploy inventory and items to restaurants, right? And understanding their growth and what's important for their business is actually one of the exciting things that actually brought me to Meal Ticket. And when you look at that side of the business, you kind of see the full circle, right? You kind of say, okay, well, they're working with operators, which you and I have spent a lot of time in our careers with, but now it's like, okay, these are fairly large organizations, but very family oriented, right? So they kind of have a very similar similar mindset to the operator, right? Like how do I get better? How do I drive more efficiency? Very relationship focused organizations really care about their customers, and the solutions that we bring to that market, kind of help them accelerate that, right? So better data, better insight in terms of who their customers are, what their customers are buying from them, and then thinking through. Again, the food service space is super thin when it comes to margins. So for giving them the tools and whatnot to kind of manage rebates and so it's a big part of the business where like a big supplier like Tyson Chicken or McCain's or name your massive kind of conglomerate will offer incentives, trade dollars or rebates to distributors who then can pass that savings on to operators. And managing all that is not easy. It's not easy, especially when you're doing millions upon millions and millions of dollars worth of sales.
Right.
So that's a big part of our TrackMax solution in terms of how we manage that, and understanding that and getting into the weeds of learning that part of the business. Like everyone kind of understands it, at a high level. Yeah. But when you get into the weeds, like there's a lot of stuff you have to take into consideration. So I mean, hats off to the team that kind of works on that. But for me, it's been a great learning curve and kind of appreciating. It's not just about kind of creating a meal and managing the restaurant. It's about how do you also kind of help these distributors who are critical to the supply chain. And helping them kind of manage their businesses more efficiently as well. So that's kind of the other side of the equation for me. And then looking at kind of the suppliers and how do we work with them as well in terms of giving them the data that makes them more efficient and more knowledgeable in terms of where they spend their promotional dollars, right? So it's fantastic kind of having this vantage point that's kind of end to end. It's been great.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting because when you think about it, like I know the food side is a bit different, but on the alcohol side, in many places in at least US and Canada, it's like a 3-tiered system, and so it's like pretty fragmented. You got the producers, then you got the actual distributors, and then you got the end on-premise either locations or whether it's retail or restaurants. And what ends up happening is like one of the problems on that side of things is like the producers get data from the distributors. So like how many cases were sold, but it's very or pallets or whatever, millions of cases, but kind of stops there. And the distributors understand like who bought what, but again, it stops there. But like getting to the last point, which it sounds like you can do with, your MarketMan solution and Meal Ticket, but it's like understanding what's actually happening. So like, sure, maybe restaurant X got, I don't know, X cases of this tequila, but did they sell it in their premium cocktail, or was that like the staff drink, or was that like the promo drink? Like what actually happened? Or did it just not sell and it's just sitting on the shelf because it was a deal and it just sat on the shelf? Like, so having that last piece of like, being connected with the POS and understanding how it's being sold and the recipes and the costs. And that's where I think, a MarketMan or a Whisk really can help. But I'm curious to know on the food side, maybe it's not fragmented in a different way, but like what challenges you have there? Because obviously on the alcohol side, you kind of it's more of a visibility issue because it's like, level 3 can only sell to 2 can only sell to 1. And like, there's not much communication between the others,
I think that, the challenge or, opportunity, I like to look at things more as opportunities. I think it's really, how do you leverage, these firms are, they've been around a long time. Yeah. Right. And they've served their communities for a long time. And I think really where the opportunity is like, how do you kind of help, our technology and our products are really geared around, helping them kind of strengthen those relationships. So using technology as a way to kind of, strengthen relationships with their customers, help them optimize their profits and their margins through through being able to kind of manage, rebates more effectively. It's a massive industry that we don't talk about a lot, but it's really complex, right? And it's about essentially it's making sure, if you have, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of invoices, how do you make sure that you're getting, your extra dollar per case? Being able to kind of have technology that allows you to simplify that and invoice that and generate revenue off of that helps these companies, where the margins are sub 2%, even lower in some cases, right? Getting back a few basis points worth of margin is substantial.
It's massive.
So that's really kind of the key, in how we kind of help them. And I think there's a lot more opportunity to optimize within these businesses. So that's kind of what we're focused on in that regard.
Got it.
But yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, it's a whole different world that I haven't really spent too much time in. But it's great learning about it and kind of meeting the individuals that are kind of, driving the agenda forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know obviously, maybe putting your product hat on, I know you have a ton of product experience, both what you're doing today at, Meal Ticket and MarketMan, but also at, Touch Bistro days and beyond. I'm curious, just maybe shifting gears and speaking a bit about product. I'd like to pick your brain. How do you think about prioritizing features and enhancements? Because I know there's no shortage of customers wanting improvements, and obviously you got to listen. But how do you go about prioritizing what you guys want to do, what customers want, and just kind of building that list of features?
It's more of, I don't want to say it's a textbook approach, but essentially it's, you have to kind of, it's part art, part science, right? There's things that you need to do, right? There's realities of the market, there's realities of the business that you need to kind of factor in. And essentially, prioritization is, you kind of look at your overall overarching company goals and strategy and everything you want to achieve, kind of your North Star in terms of where you want to go. But then you have to be mindful of things that you need to address within the business, and you kind of create like a weighting system, right? In terms of what's new that we need to kind of play. What are our customers asking for? How do we make sure that we can evaluate that, size that? So a lot of the work essentially is scoping and questioning and really challenging, is this something that is going to be at incremental enterprise value? Is this, something that we need to do to kind of address a specific customer need? So that's kind of the debate that we have with within the product organization, but also, with the stakeholders, right? So I think the other piece here is tight alignment with each of the functional groups, especially the customer facing groups. Right. And making sure that, if we're hearing noise, it's quickly being able to kind of, understand what kind of noise is it.
Got it.
And be attuned to that, and always question, always kind of have an eye out for how we look for those new things, but more so making sure that, everything that we do has a positive customer impact as the end result.
I love that. And maybe just for fun, can you think of a time, and if you can't, I'm sure there's plenty, but of a time where maybe a product launch didn't go as planned, because we talk about the good, but I'm sure being in products is not easy, and there's times where things don't go as planned. And maybe if you have any fun stories there, and maybe what you learned from that experience.
What's changed? I can't really think of a specific example, but I can think of ways I think of how things could have gone better, right? And I think when I think about my evolution and launching new products and all that, the main lesson for me has always been, I think you need to kind of have organizational alignment early, right? So if you kind of think of my history at Moneris and MasterCard, fairly large organizations, when things launch, it's usually a big deal, right? So taking that kind of large company kind of mentality around ensuring everything's kind of lined up, you have press releases, you have internal communications, you have, people trained up across your sales training, your support training, all that stuff, having that, taking that framework and bringing it to kind of smaller companies, it's kind of helped me, because it doesn't matter. What I've learned is, like, it doesn't matter on the size of the release or what you're trying to do. People are still impacted, right? So it could be, so being able to just to kind of have a game plan around, at MasterCard, our former head of product, when I was there, used to have this saying around look left, look right. Right. And product was more than kind of just like, product managers had a lot, had a lot more like P&L type of accountability. So like, if you weren't looking left and seeing how you're going to impact your support resources, if you're not looking right, see how you're going to impact your sales resources, then you're not doing your job.
Right.
Right. So it's that kind of, mentality that I kind of go into, it's like, are we, if we release this feature, is it gonna blow up our support queue, right? Because we weren't trained properly. So like, what needs to make sense for it? So that's kind of the main lesson around, making a career of introducing new capabilities and releasing, products.
Yeah.
Is making sure that there's that strong organizational alignment and people know what role they have to play. As a result of bringing something to market.
That makes sense. And then how would you say you've maybe fostered like a culture of innovation within your teams at Meal Ticket, right? Because obviously there's maybe a balance, right? You want people to be innovative and think different and whatnot, but obviously, you can't move too fast. So how do you guys maybe manage the, innovation at Meal Ticket?
You want to always have, I use something called like a horizon framework, but essentially you want to make sure that you're delivering for your customers today, right? Like, you're spending most of your time and energy kind of delivering and driving for the business value for today, but you don't want to lose sight of kind of what's next. And I think, depending, on your role and where you sit, you have a different point of view of like, well, this may not be something we want to work on this year, but maybe something we should think about next year. Right. And just have that line of sight and be able to kind of openly communicate that and share ideas and document and kind of, we meet frequently and all that. So if there's something that we say, hey, this is something that I'm hearing over here, it could grow into something bigger. Maybe we should, plot it out for something that we evaluate in a quarter or 2 quarters from now. And I think that's kind of, there really is like, I don't think there really is any, outside of the pandemic, I don't think there's like any like, black swans that all kind of pop up.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah, that was an interesting moment to say the least. I think a lot of people, had to pivot fast, and it wasn't easy. I mean, out of curiosity, like how do you navigate, or like, if I think about the COVID time, right? Like it was super hard for the hospitality industry. You being in hospitality tech, just out of curiosity, how did you kind of approach such a tough moment? Like what are strategies you thought of, in the moment, right? When no one knew what the hell to do? Like how do you think about that? Like crisis management, I guess.
It was definitely a tough time. I think, what kind of, having a great team is one, and having a good leader at the time was two. And I think the main thing for me was being so closely aligned to the industry. You just had this innate desire to help, right? So what are the things that I can do, that my team can do, that the organization can do to help the industry kind of survive this unknown scenario?
Yeah.
How do we help them navigate? What are the tools? What are the things that we can do to help them kind of, get by the week, the month, until things started to kind of normalize. Right. And I think that was kind of, so it's a combination of what are the things that the product can do, and it's a combination of what the company can do. Right. I think that was kind of, the I guess the driving force around kind of navigating those those weird times.
Yeah, and then have you ever thought of like what things, let's say, you would do differently? Like imagine, I hate to imagine this, but if there was a COVID 2.0, like are there things that you're like, what, if this ever happened again?
I haven't really thought through another COVID 2.0. But I think the industry has built that resiliency muscle, right? there's things that we can't protect against, but I think ultimately, the fact that during COVID, online ordering, kind of skyrocketed, different operating models emerged.
Yeah.
And I think what the industry has done is they've almost created their own insulated way of if maybe not COVID, but if something else were to cause, mass shutdowns, people still need to eat at the end of the day. Right. And I think there's, the different modalities in terms of, how they operate have kind of been tested. So I think the industry's kind of built some.
So that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. Curbside pickup, ghost kitchens, it's that like delivery models. Yeah. It's true that there's been some interesting, like the one thing I will say is like, I think we've all seen it. Like, obviously there's been a lot of digital transformation happening in general in the restaurant scene, but I think there's been a steep curve, in terms of growth, like during COVID, right? Like third party ordering and online ordering is like a key one, the QR code made a comeback, right? From menus.
And it drove habitualization, right? That was a big thing that, in my MasterCard days was like, how do you focus on industries that are habitualized? Meaning people are, tapping a card or using Apple Pay in certain industries to help drive that. And QSR restaurants is one of those industries, right? People, if I go pick up food, I'm tapping my card or I'm using Apple Pay and I wouldn't think to not tap my card, right? Online ordering is the same thing. It's like a lot of people have like, I'll just order online, right? And I have my few spots on my, dining roster that I cycle through and, I'll just go there.
Yeah. And one of the things, and correct me if I'm wrong, obviously I know MarketMan is international. I don't know if Meal Ticket is as well, but being, working with international clients and employees, I imagine there's like some cultural differences. I'm just curious if you can highlight any interesting ones maybe you've seen either internally or just from a restaurant operator point of view of like, dealing with restaurants in, I don't know, Italy versus, Canada, like anything that comes to mind.
I think there's more commonalities than there are differences.
Interesting. Okay.
I think a good operator is a good operator regardless of what country you sit in.
Yeah.
You're right. We do have customers all around the globe. We have teams that are all around the globe. Good operators operate the same way, right? And you kind of see that when you make the choice to kind of leverage MarketMan, regardless of if you're in Italy or in the UK or Israel or wherever, you really have, you've chosen a tool to help you manage your business, and that puts you in a space where like you want to operate your business more effectively. And doesn't matter if you're from any other country. Right. It's just the way you've approached the situation.
Yeah, that makes sense. The one thing that we saw was kind of interesting, and it'll sound super obvious, and I'm sure you probably saw this at Touch Show too. But it was like we're obviously heavy on the liquor, wine, alcohol side, and then we do food too. But what we've noticed is like in places like maybe like the US, Canada, or the UK, like liquor is important. It's where if you run a restaurant or a full service restaurant or a bar, like you make a lot of your money. So like managing that makes sense. But then in other areas, specifically, I'm thinking like maybe like South America or even Mexico, for instance, like where the alcohol was not, they weren't as stressed about the cost of alcohol. They were more worried about, for example, the high cost of, premium steaks or whatnot. So it's like we saw this kind of difference between, really caring about, the liquor and wine versus maybe in like, again, Mexico or South America, for instance, like they really cared about like the expensive proteins, let's say, and making sure they're managing that, which super interesting when you think of it.
They're different countries, different economies have different things that they need to kind of protect against.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, but at the same, at the end of the day, it's either you're managing, a bottle of fine wine or you're managing, a premium cut of steak, right? It's you want to be able to have eyes on those products and making sure that you're optimizing your business accordingly.
100%. And then just to wrap things up, I'd love to know, like, looking back, you have a wealth of experience in the hospitality space, in the payment space, in the POS space, and now in the back of house distributor space. So given all that knowledge, anything that stands out that you had wished you known early in your career that would have made a significant difference? In other words, any lessons you can share for people listening in that are maybe in the restaurant tech world?
I think a lot of my lessons came through, trial by fire, right? I think it's like, and again, I've been very fortunate to kind of be working on things that, that are relatively new. I think from a lessons perspective, like it's just being, never kind of, I think sometimes, especially as you kind of raise up the management ranks, you tend to discount things. And I think being able to kind of stay open to new ideas, and keeping a lens on kind of the current versus the future, that's a muscle if you can build early in your career, will serve you well, right? So, don't dismiss things, just because they maybe seem hard or you don't see the market opportunity. Kind of tease out the value, and never kind of shut the door on opportunities. It may not be the right time, but most things there never really is a right time. It's about making understanding where in the industry is going and how customers are evolving, and then creating that big network of contacts, just like you and I, right? Like just having that broad network, network often, network quickly, and kind of get deep into your space. I think that's kind of lesson learned from my perspective.
I love that. And last but not least, for people who just want to find you, like, where can they connect with you if you want to plug your LinkedIn, and at the same time, if you want to plug, Meal Ticket, Market Man, anything, because we'll also include this in the episode notes and stuff, but anything you want to share on how they can reach you or reach Meal Ticket or Market Man, or I always forget the last one. What's the last one called?
TrackMax. TrackMax is part of Meal Ticket.
Okay, so, it's a part of it. Okay, got it. TrackMax.
So John Florinis, I'm on LinkedIn. And then our websites are marketman.com and mealticket.com.
Beautiful. Easy to spell. So that's awesome. So John, thank you for joining me today. Honestly, wealth of knowledge. I appreciate you sharing that wisdom coming from that hospitality and tech sides, and kind of, sharing it with our restaurant listeners. So really appreciate it. Once again, we're here with John Florinis, EVP Product at Meal Ticket.
All right. Thank you.
Feel free to check out Whisk.ai for more resources and schedule a demo with one of our product specialists to see if it's a fit for you.